Good morning. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure. Okay. I have the pleasure of introducing a member of our very own 8th Street Baptist Church family and my Spelman sister, Dr. Jasmine Shackelford. Dr. Shackelford is a native of Griffin, Georgia, and currently practices family medicine at Upson Regional Medical Center in Thomaston, Georgia. She is committed to providing comprehensive health care to patients of all ages, and her interests include women's health, obesity management, chronic disease management, and preventative care. Dr. Shackelford earned her bachelor's degree from the illustrious Spelman College, and her medical degree is from St. George's University School of Medicine. She completed her residency through the Emory Family Medical Medicine Program. Dr. Shackelford is also board certified by the American Board of Family Medicine. In a recent article with Emory, Dr. Shackelford says, "Being a Black woman in medicine, I've learned that some people aren't always quick to trust, but I am a part of this community and I bring more than my white coat. I bring my whole self." Today, she is more than a doctor. She's a trusted presence in her community, the kind who makes house calls, mentors students, and builds trust one conversation at a time. And so without further ado, once we get her slides up, I am excited to introduce Dr. Jasmine Shackelford.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoy doing this. So one of the reasons that I went into medicine was because, just a little bit, like we don't have to go into detail, but one of the reasons was because just seeing things in our community and how they affected us as African Americans, like the health disparities that existed like in our community. And also the mistrust sometimes that we have as it relates to our healthcare system, really mainly based on our history in this country, right? And so sometimes being of this community, it's hard to trust certain things. And so I really wanted to kind of impact that. And one of my passions is patient education. So when my patients come in to see me, I try my best to do a lot of educating with the limited time that I have, but that's always important because I feel like as healthcare providers, we sometimes talk to you or at you, but we don't talk with you. And so doing this type of stuff is actually, I mean, it's like really, it's so funny. When I was making my PowerPoint, I was thinking about how when I first started, I always had a vision that I would be able to do something like this. So it really just feels full circle in the fact that God is just, so wonderful and able to bring to fruition the things that I hope for myself. So patient education is really one of my passions with being in medicine. So today, I really want us to have a conversation. I want it to be very informative, educational, and I just want you to leave here feeling like you have learned something, maybe added to what you already know, and feeling empowered so that when you go and speak to your own healthcare providers, that you feel like you're going into that conversation, feeling knowledgeable and knowing some things. So thank you guys for the introduction. Thank you for sharing that article, and I'm happy to be here. We're ready, Byron. There it goes. Okay, so the topic of today is obviously diabetes, which there's a lot to talk about as it relates to diabetes. But I really wanted to focus on the fact that it's more than just too much sugar and make sure that we all understand exactly what diabetes means, how it happens, what goes on in your body, what things you can do to prevent it, what things you can do to treat it when it's already there, and how to live a healthy life despite possibly being given this diagnosis. So just a little disclaimer, and I know you can't read that, but the gist of it just says that this is meant to be educational. So it is not meant to replace the conversation that you should have with your own healthcare provider. These are my professional views. They're not affiliated with any institution or my actual practice. This information is always changing. Everything that we'll go over today, you are able to assess it yourself. So the internet is free. You can find all of this information online, but it's meant to be educational, not for you to, kind of use this as your way of like, oh, I talked to the doctor and this is what she said. No, like I'm a doctor, but not your doctor. So this is meant to just for you to feel empowered to learn. And so when you leave here that you feel like you learned something so that you can discuss more with your own healthcare provider. All right, so a little bit about our objectives today. So we'll obviously talk about diabetes, meaning what is diabetes. We'll go into the different types of diabetes. So there are different types. So we'll talk a little bit about the different types that exist, type 1, type 2, and some of the other common ones. The bulk of our presentation and the bulk of our message today will be focused around type 2 diabetes because that is the more common one. I don't think I'm going to stand here the whole time because this just feels too informal. So the bulk of it will be type 2 because that is the most common type of diabetes. So majority of our presentation will focus on that one. But we will talk a little bit about the different types of diabetes that exist just so that you're aware and have like a knowledge as it relates to the different types. So what is diabetes mellitus? So the word diabetes is actually Greek in origin. So it means to siphon or to excrete. And so that kind of correlates to frequent urination. So that's one of the symptoms of diabetes. The word mellitus is Latin for honeyed or sweet. So when you have diabetes, one of the ways that sometimes you kind of come to find out is you may have symptoms such as I go to the bathroom a lot. Maybe I actually smell a sweet smell to my urine. I remember when I was in one of my trainings in New York, I had a professor, one of my attendings, he was from another country, and he told me, where I come from, we didn't have all these fancy tests, and so we weren't able to do a simple blood test to test someone for diabetes, but we would take a urine sample and actually smell it and even taste it. And I was like, okay, I'm glad I am not of that time. But that is one of the ways that you're able to actually have one of the first inklings that there may be something going on. So mellitus, honeyed or sweet, and that refers to the actual sweet taste and the sweet smell that can be in your urine. And that's because the urine is one of the ways that we excrete sugar through our body. You may also know it as sugar. Some people say, I got the sugar. I have a lot of my older people come in and say, I got the sugar, doc. I know what they're talking about. They're saying they got, diabetes. Some people say sugar diabetes. It sometimes is also referred to as T2DM, so type 2 diabetes mellitus. So those are all common phrases for it. Okay, so we'll talk in detail about what it is, but what I really wanted to focus on is that it is a chronic metabolic disease. So it is a disease in your body, and chronic meaning that it usually just doesn't develop overnight. It usually doesn't develop in a matter of days or weeks. It's a process that takes time to develop, and there's a lot of things, quote unquote, going wrong in the body. And metabolic just means the way that the body processes certain things. So as it relates to diabetes, it's the way that your body processes glucose, which is AKA sugar, all right? So when we say glucose, we're referring to sugar. It is a matter of you have a high amount of sugar in your blood. Now that sounds very simple, so we'll go into detail about how does that happen, where's that sugar supposed to go, why is it staying in the blood, but at the core it is you have too much sugar in the blood, it's in an inappropriate place, and why is it there? And oftentimes it involves a problem with insulin. So insulin is a big thing that we'll go over, because a lot of times when people hear insulin, they just think about, insulin that you give yourself. But insulin is actually a hormone that we make, so it's something that your body is supposed to make. And in diabetes, it's either you are not making enough of it, you're not using it efficiently, or a combination of both. So either not enough, used improperly, or a combination of both. So in simple terms, and I know we can't see that maybe, but glucose, which is sugar, is fuel to your body. So we actually need glucose. It's actually good. I tell people to think about it as you put gas in your car. That's the fuel to help your car run. So we put glucose in our body because that's the fuel for our body. Insulin is the key. And diabetes happens when the key is either missing or it doesn't work well. So a lot of times people say sugar is bad. Well, the wrong type of sugar is bad, and too much of a certain type of sugar is bad. But we actually do need sugar because that's the way that our cells work. So your brain functions on sugar, your muscles function on sugar. So you actually need it. It's just not too much, the right amount, and making sure that it's being processed properly. And I meant to say when we started, if you have any questions, this is informal, so stop me, ask me anything you want to clarify. I am okay with that, okay? Yes, ma'am. Uh-oh. Me too. Yes, absolutely. So sugar. Oh, no, Miss Tigler. Okay. So that, yes, ma'am. So does that have something to do with diabetes? Yes, ma'am. And sugar cravings that's a very real thing. And most of us, every now and then, will have some form of a sugar craving. Towards the end, we'll talk about if you have that, what things can you reach for that may fix that sugar craving, but not necessarily be bad for you. So if you had the choice between, I got a Hershey bar right here and a apple right here, I would rather you pick the apple because it does have some sweetness to it. And that hopefully fixes your sugar craving. So we'll talk about that. I love sugar too, Miss Taylor, I really do. Okay, so I want to make sure we understand how the body works. I want you to understand the anatomy of the body. So when we in medicine say anatomy, we're talking about the parts. And when we say how it works, we call that the physiology. So anatomy and physiology is one of the first things we learn. And that just means here's the part. Here's how it should work. So in your body, you have an organ called your pancreas, right? It's located in your abdomen. Now, in your chest, mama, in your abdomen. Mama was pointing to her chest. No, ma'am. It's in your abdomen. It is a gland that is important for two reasons. It helps with digestion, and it also helps regulate your sugar. So your pancreas, which you're born with, should hopefully, and we'll talk about the reason that may not work, that's type 1, but if you're born with a properly functioning pancreas, that organ is responsible for making insulin. So that's where insulin comes from, right? So it's not just something we made up and it's in a vial, it's actually a hormone in your body that's supposed to be there, and it has a job, and it's made from your pancreas. When you eat, the body is amazing, and I have to struggle sometimes at work with not going too churchy with my patients, because when you think about this stuff, there's no one that could have made the body so magical like this. Like it really just, it gets to me sometimes. I have to say, okay, you're not at church. When you eat, the body is so smart. So when you take in a meal, your blood interprets that, and you have sugar now in your bloodstream, right? So even if it's a meal that Ms. Tigler's having at night that's sweet, or if it's just a healthy meal, no matter what it is, if it has glucose in it, which most meals do, that will go into your bloodstream. And that blood passes everywhere through your body. It passes through your pancreas, and your pancreas goes, we just had a meal. Time to make insulin. So your body knows when it's time to make more insulin based on what you just partook in. So you eat a meal, your pancreas is aware of that, it makes insulin. That insulin now travels also through your blood and regulates what happens to that glucose or that sugar, that you just partook in. So let's say I ate that meal, there's glucose, my pancreas made insulin. The insulin goes to your muscle, to your brain, to your liver, and it says, hey, here's some glucose, please take it into your cell, to your body, to that organ. That's how the sugar gets out of your blood and into where it's supposed to be. Got it? So the job of the pancreas is to make insulin, and insulin's job is to regulate where that sugar goes, how that sugar gets into the organs, and how it's used. That's a normal functioning body, all right? Next slide, Byron. When you have diabetes, we'll talk about where in that process something goes wrong, okay? The first type of diabetes that we'll touch on is type 1. So there's a slide that'll go over. Unfortunately, these are patients that are born with their pancreas not functioning properly. So they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't take in too much sugar. They didn't live an unhealthy lifestyle. They were just unfortunately born with their pancreas not working, or the body attacking the pancreas. So that is an autoimmune condition, right? That means your body is doing something to itself inappropriately. Type 2 is a little different. You are not born with your pancreas not working. It happens over time, and so therefore, we're going to talk about that because that's what most of us unfortunately deal with. There are also other types of diabetes. So briefly, there's something called gestational diabetes. That means diabetes only in pregnancy. So it's a matter of the placenta does something inappropriate when you're pregnant, so those hormones kind of go awry, and that's how you develop gestational diabetes. Once you deliver your baby, the diabetes goes away. So it's literally only gestational, it's only diabetes in pregnancy. There's a term called pre-diabetes, which hopefully everyone has heard of. It means borderline. We used to call it borderline, or people say, I'm on the cusp of becoming a diabetic, or my doctor said I'm close to it. That's pre-diabetes. It's automatically a precursor to developing type 2 diabetes. Unfortunately, oftentimes, if you make it into the pre-diabetic range, you go into the diabetic range. But it basically is, and we'll go over the numbers, it's a number that you fall into before you get to the diabetic range. There's something called secondary diabetes. This one is a little less common, but this happens because it's like a consequence of something else. So for an example, if you're someone that has a lot of chronic illnesses, and let's say you have to be on like a steroid all the time or chronically, steroids increase your sugar. And so therefore you can develop diabetes from like medication use. And maybe you're not able to not use those medicines, and we say, sorry, this could happen, but we need to treat this with a steroid, and therefore we tell people you could be at risk for diabetes. So it's like secondary, it's caused by something else. And then a very new term, but I just wanted to mention it in case anyone has heard of it, it's called MODY, or mature onset diabetes of the young. This is very interesting because it's a very young person who presents with diabetes, but it's not type 1. It's not type 2. It's a gene problem. It's not autoimmune. It looks similar to type 2, but it's neither type 1 or type 2. So that one's a little rare, but I wanted to mention it in case anyone has ever heard of it. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Sure. Not always. And that's why we care so much about preventing it from becoming overworked. So it's not as a forgiving organ as, like, let's say the liver or the kidneys, where over time you can correct things you have done wrong. When the pancreas burns out, it usually burns out. So when people develop pancreas issues, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options for reversing that damage. And that's why it's so important when you have diabetes that we don't get to the point of overworking your pancreas, because there's no way to reverse that damage. Yes, ma'am. Very good question. Yes. Oh, that's a good question. We're going to get to that. That's coming up. Reverend Montgomery said, what are some of the things we can do to overwork it? Basically, not doing a good job treating your diabetes. So if your diabetes is uncontrolled, you overwork your pancreas, it burns out, and it gives out, and it no longer does what it's supposed to do. Yep, so we'll get into that too. All right, Byron, next slide. Okay, so briefly, type 1, autoimmune, you're born with it. Remember that slide that we just talked about, all the anatomy. So your pancreas doesn't work, therefore it doesn't make insulin, therefore you are forever going to be on lifelong insulin. You can't survive without it. Presents in early age, so either childhood or adolescent. So when someone is very young and they have diabetes, more than likely it's type 1. We'll put an asterisk there because unfortunately we're seeing type 2 at a very young age, but very young age, and usually it's type 1. You did not have anything to do with it, no problem with your lifestyle, and you forever need insulin. Okay, next slide. So type 2 diabetes, briefly again, your body does not use or properly process insulin like it should. There's a term that floats around called insulin resistance. Maybe you guys have also heard that. That just means over time, your pancreas, and this kind of goes into your question, Reverend Montgomery, has tried so hard to make the insulin because, let's back up. You have now had a bad diet. You got a lot of sugar in your diet. Your pancreas is all the time now saying, make insulin, make insulin, make insulin. Anything that has to do this all the time is going to eventually stop doing it so well. So it's going to burn out. However, it tries its hardest to make as much insulin as it can. So now you have high insulin levels. Your cells, like your muscles, your brain, doesn't really know what to do at this point. Now they're not taking in the glucose like it should, so they've become resistant to insulin. So now you're in that insulin resistance, which means your insulin is not working properly. Therefore, you're leading to the prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. And that's what happens when your cells are resistant. If it's not letting the sugar in, where does the sugar go? It stays in your blood. So now you check your sugar, it's always high. Now your sugar's in your blood all the time. So now your blood vessels are seeing the side effects of that because it's in the inappropriate place. Blood sugar goes up, the pancreas becomes overworked. So all of that kind of just touches what we just said. So insulin resistant pancreas burns out. Now you're in the realm of prediabetes/diabetes. Okay, that's just in a image form. So same thing, is just showing the pancreas being overworked over time. Okay, so why do we care so much about diabetes? Well, it is very common. So about 590 million people worldwide suffer. Here in the United States is about 38 million. That's like 11% of our population. So it's a lot of people. It's probably more than that because a lot of times people don't come to the doctor. So who knows what you have if you don't come to the doctor? So these are numbers that are reported based on actual statistics, people coming in, getting checked. We're documenting this, we're reporting this, but oftentimes people don't come in, and so these numbers we don't know, so it could be actually more. 1 in 9 adults have diabetes. If you don't mind, if you have diabetes, can you raise your hand? So we can look at the amount of people in this room. We have more than 9 people. So 1 in 9 people. So if you see 9 people, 1 of them are going to have diabetes. So it's very common. It is the top 10 causes of death worldwide. And we'll talk about how it leads to death. So when people say they died because they had that very bad diabetes, well, what happened? It's a lot of things that happen. There's a lot of processes that go into place that lead to people having, morbidity and mortality from diabetes. But it is in the top 10 causes of deaths in the world. It is also very common in the youth. So unfortunately, previously, probably 15 to 20 years ago, when we said diabetes in someone 18 and under, we automatically assumed it was type 1. Now, when we say a young person under 18 has diabetes, it's almost as equal to type 1. So very young people are also getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. In the early 2000s, it was about 9 per 100,000 youth. Now it's about 18 per 100,000 youth, so it doubled. I have diagnosed diabetes in a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, not type 1, but type 2. And there's a lot of factors for that. Childhood obesity rates are increasing. We live a very sedentary life. It's a family thing, so oftentimes if the children don't see the parents doing right, they're not going to do right. So it's just a vicious cycle. So even now, type 2 diabetes can affect young people. It used to be something that only older people got, but not anymore. Questions? This slide is just showing over the years, so early 2000s, and I think it ends at 2020, the prevalence of type 2 diabetes. So you can just see the trend has just gone up. And it's not because we're not doing a good job with like detecting and treating, it's just we're fighting so hard against certain risk factors. And so it really is a conversation, and we'll touch on that about how to prevent it and how we can hopefully slow down the trend of it just increasing. It is more common in Black people, so we are twice as likely to be affected than our white counterparts. In the U.S., we have about 12% of non-Hispanic Blacks that are affected compared to about 6% of non-Hispanic white people. So we are disproportionately affected way more than our white counterparts. Who wants to maybe give me a reason why they think that's the case? I put some of my thoughts at the end, but I want to hear what other people think. And that could be a whole presentation in itself, but thoughts as to why Black people are more affected. The food we eat, absolutely. Our lifestyle, what we eat. Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Um, this could be an entire presentation. There's a lot of factors. Everything you guys said, I agree with 100%. Unfortunately, there's a lot of just disparities across so many different domains as it relates to, race. So socioeconomic status, living in a food desert, if anyone's ever heard that term. If you go to certain neighborhoods and you just step out and look around, you have fast food on every corner stores where you just can get snacks. Grocery stores are miles, away from the central hubs. So you don't even have access to sometimes healthy options. Wealth disparities, unfortunately, and I tell my patients this because I know it's easier said than done, it is expensive to eat healthy. It really is. And now there's some ways around it. So when people give me that excuse, I always have a rebuttal to give back to them. But it's very expensive to eat healthy. So when you're shopping in the grocery store, and I tell my patients always shop on the perimeter, it costs way more to do that. I get that things in the center aisles are cheaper, and if you have a family, you have to buy those things. There are ways around it, but even that plays a role. Yes, Ms. Perla? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. Elders. That's right. Absolutely. That is a hard task, and it does not involve one thing, because that's a system-wide. Over the years, we know the discrimination that exists in our communities, and it will take a lot of time to reverse just even being in that situation. What I do at least counsel my patients on is you can find ways to pick healthier options. They may not be foods that we enjoy and that we want to eat, but you can find ways, even if it's not a fresh produce, if you can get frozen, that's better than canned. So even just small little things that consistently over time add up. The biggest thing is also keeping yourself active. Parks are free, walking is free. Like, you can do the physical part. The diet part, I agree, that part is hard, and I think it'll involve a lot of things. But finding ways where you can make an impact that may not just be right in your face, but we talk a lot with my patients about I'm going to give you I went to Aldi myself. And if you have an Aldi nearby, that's a very cheap grocery store where you can get a lot of good stuff. You can get all of this for under this amount. And it may not be necessarily ultra processed foods. But that, I mean, at the bottom of my slide, I had some reasons why I felt like that was the case. We are 300, 400 years of oppression. We're not going to overcome that in, a matter of 100 years. So we have a lot of catching up to do for even being put in these situations. Yes, ma'am. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. It's also your self willpower. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. I 100% agree with that. That's correct. Okay. Any more questions or thoughts or comments? These are very good conversations. Okay. So I wish we could. Can you guys read that? That's too far away, isn't it? I know. Okay. I wanted to ask a question about this because I have it broken up into 2 columns. So I wanted someone to be able to tell me what each column has in common, and what's the difference between these risk factors. I'll say, okay, the first column to your left, it says, so these are the risk factors for developing diabetes. So 1, being overweight or obese. It's worse to have a lot of visceral fat, which is fat around your organs or abdominal fat. The next one says physical inactivity, living a sedentary lifestyle. And then the next one says an unhealthy diet. So partaking in refined carbs, ultra processed foods. So that means like stuff you just get from the freezer and throw in the microwave. And then sugary drinks and snacks. So all of those are risk factors for diabetes. On the right-hand side, these are also risk factors. So they say family history. Just having a family history naturally puts you at risk, unfortunately. Age, so just getting older, we have more tendency to develop more chronic things. Race / ethnicity, so being of Black, African American, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asian Americans, actually. History of gestational, so we talked about that, just diabetes and pregnancy. Hormonal disorder, so things that you're kind of like also don't have control over, and then medication use. So all of these are risk factors. What's the difference between the 2 columns? The risk factors on the left versus the risk factors on the right. Absolutely. Yes. Sister Montgomery said self-imposed. So modifiable risk factors, meaning things you have in your control, and non-modifiable risk factors, things you just don't have in your control. So I tell patients, you have control over being overweight or obese. You have control over being physically inactive. You have control over being a couch potato. You have control over choosing the healthy foods. You don't have control over your family. We can't pick our family. We're born into it. We can't change our genes. You don't have control over getting older. You don't have control over being Black. You don't have control if you unfortunately are born with some other hormonal problems. So you have to work extra hard with the things you have in your control so that you can combat the things you don't have in your control. So, and that just not related just to type 2 diabetes, but a lot of things, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. You have factors that you can change that will lower your risk, and you have factors that you just can't change. So if you already say, my family has diabetes, I'm Black, I'm getting older, then you have to be saying, well, what else can I do to combat all of those things? Okay, so non-modifiable and modifiable risk factors, but those in general are risk factors for developing type 2 diabetes. How can we prevent type 2 diabetes? The prevention is opposite of the risk factors. So the top one says maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So you are exercising at least 150 minutes a week. You're eating a healthy diet. You're avoiding ultra-processed foods. Your diet is more of balanced and whole foods. You're managing your stress. So stress actually increases your risk of diabetes. So when you have increased stress, you have increased cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. Increased cortisol causes high glucose in your blood, and boom, diabetes. How can you manage that? Prayer, maintain a good relationship with God, meditation, mindfulness, therapy. So most of these are the complete opposite of the risk factors. So it can be prevented. You can lessen your chances. Yes, you have things you may not have control over, but you can do the best at the things you do have control over. The last one says screen or screening. And we'll talk about why screening is also one of the better ways to prevent diabetes. Yes, sir.
What's your thoughts about
Great question. Yes. Mr. Hodo said, what are my thoughts about using certain herbs as a way of prevention? The key word in your question was as a way of prevention. So when patients come to me and they say, I started taking berberine or saw palmetto, beetroot juice to help my A1C of 12, I tell them that's not going to help. If patients come to me and they say, I started taking this, I don't have any health problems, and I'm taking all of these things to lessen my chances, I say, great. So the key is prevention. If you start those things before problems develop, they may work. If you start those things once already being diagnosed with diabetes, they won't have a big impact. So herbs and more natural homeopathic remedies, they have a role, but the role is in prevention. So yes, to your question, for prevention. For treatment, and once disease process has already developed, no. And I have lost a lot of patients actually because we don't see eye to eye on that. So if you say, I don't want to take any of these medicines and I'm only going to take my berberine, I say, well, we're not going to be a good fit for each other because you could have done that years ago and that would have prevented you from developing these problems. But now that you have these problems, we are not going to reach our goal together with you just doing that. So to add to it and to supplement it and as an adjunct to medicine, yes, but the better role is for prevention. Okay, the last part of that slide says screening. So a screening test is something that we do before a problem develops. This is why it's important to go to your doctor, to get your physicals, to ask for certain blood work so that you can know if you have any problems before they actually arise. So screening for type 2 diabetes is very important. Who should be screened for diabetes? Reverend, am I going to say everybody? Reverend just read my slide and said 35 to 70. Honestly, Reverend Montgomery's response was really spot on. It's probably very rare that you don't have a reason to be screened for diabetes. So I say that because a lot of times people will come in and say, screen me for everything. I want every test there is. And I say, okay, let's back up because you've been on TikTok and Instagram and social media and you want all these tests, but what do they mean? Why do you want these? Do we really need to do that? What's our role? A1C and diabetes screening, actually, most people fit a reason to be screened for it. So as following guidelines as providers, we're supposed to screen anyone age 35 and up who is overweight or obese. That's most people in America. Overweight is a BMI of 35 or a BMI of 25. Obese is a BMI of 35. If you have a BMI above 25 and you're 35 years and older, you should be screened for diabetes. It also says if you are younger than 35, you can be screened if you meet the following. So you have a family history, most Black people do. You have a history of gestational, so if you have diabetes in pregnancy, unfortunately, you can get it in a later life, so you need to be screened. If you have any chronic problems like hypertension, high cholesterol, if you're physically inactive, if you are Black. So if you're 35 and up, and you're overweight, obese, you automatically get screened. If you're younger than 35 and you have any of those, you get screened. And most people have one or more of those. If your doctor does not offer that to you, then you bring that up and say, hey, with my labs, are we checking my risk for diabetes? Are we running my screening for that? Early screening equals early detection, which means you can start early treatment, which means you can have better outcomes. So that's the point of having early screening. Questions? All right. What are the signs and symptoms of diabetes? Just throw them out there. Blurred vision, frequent urination, headaches, crazy stress, cravings, thirsty. She said thirst and stress. Yeah, that fruity smell to your urine. No one said a big one yet. And the hint is on the slide. Absolutely. So you may not have any symptoms of diabetes. That's why we also call it the silent killer, just like we call high blood pressure. I have diagnosed and detected diabetes probably more often in people that did not come to me with signs and symptoms than people that came to me with signs and symptoms. So you can actually be walking around with your sugars in the 500s and you may not feel a thing until one day I've had that happen. Until one day you feel a thing and then it's too late. So you may not have any signs and symptoms of diabetes. When you do, next slide, Byron, the ones that you guys listed were actually really good. Someone said thirsty, someone said frequent urination. There's one more that we call the 3 Ps, so you almost got all of those. We have a saying in medicine, the 3 Ps of symptoms of diabetes. So polyuria, so urine, so frequent urination, polydipsia, excessive thirst, and polyphagia, excessive hunger, where you're just hungry all the time. All of those are the 3 Ps, signs and symptoms of diabetes. Fatigue, low energy. Imagine just walking around with that much sugar just floating through your blood. That can't feel good. So I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I don't have a lot of energy. Brain fog, because your brain's not getting the glucose in like it should. Someone said blurry vision, that's great. What's that say? Slow healing wounds. No one mentioned that one. So a lot of times people will come in and say, I've had this wound on my foot and I just can't get it to heal. Why? Because diabetes affects your wound healing process. And so over time, if it's damaging your blood vessels, if it's damaging your nerves, your wounds don't heal like they should. They take a longer time to heal. Another big one is frequent infections. So a lot of people come in and say, I just keep getting a UTI, or I keep getting a yeast infection. My skin keeps getting this yeast infection, so it can be frequent infections. Just how we need sugar to fuel ourselves, so does bacteria and so does yeast organisms. They live on sugar. So if you're providing them with a constant high sugar environment, they're going to overgrow. So frequent infections is another one. No one said this one, and this one's a big one. Numbness, tingling, burning in their hands and feet. That is very common. That's neuropathy. So oftentimes people say my feet are always on fire or they're numb. They feel like they're constantly asleep. That's a sign of diabetes as well. And we'll talk about why that happens. Changes in your skin is a sign. So dry skin. And there's something else that's called acanthosis nigricans, which basically means, and we've probably all seen it, individuals will, in their creases, get a very darkening rash around their neck. The skin looks almost thick or velvety. And sometimes some people may experience a little discrimination from it because you'll see it and say, oh my goodness, that person doesn't have good hygiene. It's not a hygiene problem at all. It's an internal issue with how you process sugar, and it's a metabolic dysfunction. And so sometimes when you see that, and I actually catch this a lot in kids, when they're slightly overweight, they'll have darkening. Even if you're a darker complexion, you can still see it's a darkening, thicker neck and arms, the creases of the body. So anytime you see that, that can also sometimes be a sign. Okay, next slide, Byron. So how do we diagnose diabetes? Who wants to give me their thought on that? How is it diagnosed? Blood work, yep. What do we do? What kind of blood work? A1C, perfect. Oh, good job, Reverend Jester. You beat me to something. Good job. That is correct. So the main way we diagnose diabetes is through your A1C. And we'll talk about what that test is, how it works, why we use that test, and why that test is very important. In your packet, there's a good picture of your A1C targets and where we want your A1C to be. You can also diagnose diabetes through a fasting glucose. So if we tell you, hey, we want you to come in for labs, we want you to be fasting, I'm going to check your sugar. If that's above a certain level, you can diagnose it that way. You can diagnose it through a random glucose, meaning if you're not even fasting. So oftentimes I catch it this way. So I have someone, they'll come in, they say, hey, I went to the ER because I was having, toe pain. The ER took labs because the ER always takes labs. And incidentally, their sugar is 300, 400. And I say, well, you didn't go for your sugar, but your sugar was 300. So then that leads me to say, I need to now investigate this. So a lot of times it's a random glucose that just happens to be very elevated. Anything over 200 randomly is a diagnosis of diabetes. And less common is a test called your oral glucose tolerance test. We don't do this one as often. This is how we diagnose gestational diabetes. So when you're pregnant, you have to drink this substance, wait a little bit, and they check your sugar. That's the oral glucose. Endocrinologists will do this if they're trying to differentiate some things, but the more common ones, A1C, and then a glucose level through your blood. All right, next slide. Okay, so what is the A1C? Reverend Jester already knows. He said it measures how your sugar have been over the last 90 days. That is correct. So if you have a physical coming up, a lot of people like to do their physicals when the year starts. I'm going to get on the right track. I'm going to go to the doctor, get some labs done. I'm going to eat right a week before I get there. Doesn't matter. So I have a lot of patients. They'll say, I knew I was coming to see you, so I started eating right, exercising about 2 weeks ago. And I say, well, that's good, but your A1C is going to tell me how you've been doing for the past 3 months. So that's why we like it more than a glucose. That's why it's used more often, not just to diagnose, but also to monitor how well your diabetes is doing. So once you've already been diagnosed, that is the number we care about. That's the number that we watch every 3 months to see, is your diabetes doing well? Is it not doing well? What do we need to do? It's more accurate than your day-to-day fluctuations. Yes, at home, you are checking your day-to-day fluctuations, so you're checking your sugar. But for us as providers, we care more about that A1C. And the reason how it works is in your body, you have red blood cells. They are covered with sugar, and so the A1C measures how much sugar those red blood cells are covered with. The reason it's done every 3 months is because red blood cells live for 3 months. So some people like to check it, like, can you check it? I just came last month. Can you check it again? I usually say no, because it's not going to accurately reflect your change just yet. I wouldn't want to check your A1C prematurely if you haven't given enough time for some of those old red blood cells to die and the new ones to be around. Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. So Libre or Dexcom, which Ms. Perler just mentioned, are continuous glucose monitors, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So they're constantly monitoring your sugar. If you've ever seen someone with the patch behind their arm, that's a little thread that goes in your skin, and it's monitoring your sugar continuously. And doctors should really share this with you if you have it. There are ranges of your glucose that correspond to where your A1C will likely be. So for my patients, I give them, if your glucose is in this range, more than likely when you come back, your A1C will be in this range. So if your sugars have been great, on average, let's say 80 to no more than 180, your A1C should be doing very well. If you have spent more time in the high range, your A1C is not going to be so well. So when you use those monitors, it's more of how much time, what's the percentage of time spent in the normal range, and you want that to be 70% of or more of your time. So when that patch is on, 70% of the time you want that to be in the normal range, not too low or not too high. That means your A1C should likely correspond to being good. We'll talk about how you monitor your sugar, how the continuous glucose monitor works, the different ways you're able to do that. But if you are checking your sugar and they're looking good at home, when you come back to the doctor, your A1C should be good because they're directly related to each other. So the A1C is a great test. Now, what's the A1C? Close your eyes, don't look at the slide, don't look at the slide. What's your A1C to be diagnosed with diabetes? What's the number? Above 7. Someone said 6. Someone said 6.5. Someone said 6. Okay, Miss Perla, right, 6.5. So A1C of 6.5 or higher is diabetic range. A normal A1C is 5.7 and under. That's where you want to keep your A1C if you haven't already been diagnosed. When you're going in for your screenings, because screening means we're testing you before problems have arose, you want your A1C to be 5.7 or less. That's normal. 5.7 to 6.4 is pre-diabetic. So if you fall within that range, that's the borderline, you're on the border, you're pre, that's that range. 6.5 and higher is diabetic. So I heard a lot of people say 7, and I like that you said that number because you've probably been told once you've been diagnosed with diabetes, you want to keep your A1C around 7 or less, and that is correct. That's the other page in your pamphlet. It has your A1C target. When you have been diagnosed with diabetes, we tell you if you can keep your A1C around 7 or less, then you are doing pretty good. That's the number that's been studied to show you'll less likely develop complications, you'll less likely have any bad side effects from your diabetes, and hopefully you'll be able to live a long, healthy life with that. When it goes above 7 and when you're approaching 8 and up, that's when we get concerned that you're going to develop complications. That's considered uncontrolled, and we don't want you to be there. That's how you lead to getting yourself on insulin. So 7 is also a very important number, but 6.5 is the diagnosis. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. So a lot of providers now are treating prediabetes. So it used to be, 5.6 is normal. So really, you shouldn't be on medications if you're at 5.6 unless you have been higher. So if you've been higher than 5.6, then maybe at some point your doctor decided to go ahead and treat that. But if you've only ever been at 5.6, then that's normal. You don't need to be on medicines. Now, we used to not necessarily treat prediabetes, but now that we see more often than not, most people are going to become diabetic, we have now started treating prediabetes. So usually now your doctor may offer, I usually offer, so I have a conversation. I say, you're in the pre-diabetic range. You can get this down with diet and exercise if you do it right and if you're very diligent about it. Most people are very honest and they'll say, I know I ain't gonna do right, just give me medicine. And I say, okay, well, thank you for being honest because we just bypassed a lot of stuff. So I actually appreciate that. And I'll ask, do you think you can do this on your own? Because if you tell me that you think you can, I say, okay. Like I always opt for lifestyle, diet, and exercise first before I push your medicine. So do you think you can do this? Yes, doctor, I can. I say, okay, well, let's try. If you come back in 3 months and you haven't, then I say, okay, we got to give you medicines. So it could be that some doctors treat prediabetes, but if you've never been higher than that, you don't necessarily need medicine. Any more questions? All right. That's the slide that you have in your pamphlet. So target A1C is 7. Now, this also, and that's why in the beginning I said it could be very individualized about your treatment. It's also very individualized. So if you are a young person, let's say, you're under 30 years old and you've been diagnosed with diabetes, I actually want your A1C to be normal. So I don't want you to be 7. I want you to be 5.7 and under, because you have a lot of life left to live. And if you can limit your risk of developing complications by keeping your A1C tightly controlled, then we're going to do that. Now, if you are 90 years old, I am not going to fuss at you if your A1C is 8. That's okay. There's also risk for controlling your A1C too tightly, because we can put you at risk for hypoglycemia, meaning if I'm throwing medicines at you just to get your A1C down, and next thing I know, you're hypo, you're weak, you fall, you break a hip, that's on me. Because at 90, you don't need to be a A1C of 7. You can be 8, and I'm going to be like, you know what? That's okay. That's okay, mama. Be 8. That's okay. Mainly because when we're giving you these targets, it's mainly to lower your complications, and complications take time to develop. Realistically speaking, if you're 90, God has already given you your 10, and you've already also outlived the normal life expectancy. You, realistically speaking, probably don't have another 20 years to live. So why would I treat control your A1C so tightly to put you at risk for something bad happening, like breaking a hip, before you possibly perish, right? So it's also very individualized. Most diabetics is 7, but we give a leeway for if you have risk factors for actually being too tightly controlled. And if you are a lot younger, I'm saying you got to be under 7. So 7 is what we go by, but plus or minus depending on a lot of other risk factors. Questions about that? I know some people were looking at me like, you're not going to treat my diabetes? I am, but, with caution. Okay, next. So this kind of touched on what Ms. Perla was asking about, so monitoring your sugar at home. So at home, you're checking your glucose, aka your sugar, not your A1C. There's a lot of different ways to do this. The more common is the glucose meter or the glucometer. Those most insurances cover. That's where you prick your finger. A lot of people don't like doing that, but prick your finger, get your test strip, plug it in, write it down. If you have diabetes, that log that I put at the end of your packet is very good for monitoring your sugars. So your fasting, your preprandial, which is before eating, and then your after eating, because those are the times you should be checking your sugar. But at home, you do this by your glucose meter or your continuous glucose monitor, which are the new shiny things that are a little bit more favorable. However, not everyone can get these. So a lot of times I have a pre-diabetic that say, I want you to get me a continuous monitor. I need the Dexcom. Well, those are for specific situations. So most insurances only cover a continuous monitor like the Dexcom or the Freestyle Libre if you are a type 2 diabetic with a high A1C, on insulin, or you're at risk for hypoglycemia, meaning your sugar dropping. If you are A1C of 7, we only have you on one oral medication. You don't really technically need a continuous monitor. You can just get by with checking your sugar through finger pricks. And that's just honestly just because of insurance reasons. They don't cover it for every diabetic person, okay? Now, you can actually purchase an over-the-counter continuous glucose monitor. So Dexcom has an over-the-counter version that you can purchase yourself. It is, I think it's $99, so it's $100. But instead of you fighting with your insurance, if you just really want a continuous monitor, or if you don't even have diabetes and you want to say, I just want to see what my sugar's doing so I make sure I'm not at risk, you can buy that yourself. And it's the same exact thing. You put it on and it checks your sugar. The continuous is great if you're able to get it because you can connect it to your cell phone. It's a nice little device where you can always look to see what is my sugar doing in this moment. As providers, if you have certain ones like the Dexcom, I can also log into it and see. So from our end, I can check my patient's Dexcom and see what their numbers look like. So if you forget to bring your log with you, or if you forget to bring your meter, I can see that. So it has a lot of benefits, but insurance may or may not cover it if you don't meet the qualifications for it. Questions? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Sure. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yep. So that's exactly right, Ms. Pansy. A lot of people can't get it if you are not on insulin, or if you don't have moments of your sugar dropping too low, because we can fight them for it if you run into hypoglycemia and we tell them, hey, overnight this patient drops to 40s. I want to get her a monitor because I'm concerned about that. We can fight for it that way. But the main requirement that they go by is being on insulin. Yep. But you can also buy it over the counter if you want. Yeah, a lot of people get tired of that. I get it. And when I'm able to put in a CGM, I try to, because I know pricking your finger every day is not fun. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yes, ma'am. I have heard that too. Don't, Miss Karen, you don't have to explain yourself to my mama. This just, you know better. But honestly, that is very scary. However, that is important to know, because you don't want to be dropping low like that. And if you are, that's the reason for us as your providers to adjust your medicine, because that can lead you also into, you can go into a coma. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That way you got some support if you need it. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. It does have a lot of good benefits. It does. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Stigler. Mm-hmm. Cholesterol? LDL? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Oh, perfect. So your ratio was good. So your HDL was good. That's right. That's right. Do you know why? Because when you put that pork in the pan, it's gonna make its own grease. So lean meats are better than the pork and the beef. Yeah, but that's good. So, and honestly, I'm glad you brought that up, because we'll talk when we get to the treatment about oftentimes patients with diabetes are on cholesterol medicine, and there's a reason for that. But it's good to have a good cholesterol, and if your good is good, then that does protect you. So that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good. Yep. No free medical advice. No, I'm kidding. That's good. That's really good. So there are numbers, and we'll talk about what those numbers should be, and they're also in your packet. What's considered a good range for your glucose, and what's considered too high or too low. All right, Bob, are we ready? So this one this is kind of goes into that. So at home, you're monitoring your sugar. You and your doctor should come up with your targets, okay? Because everyone is different. But in general, these numbers show you where most people should be. So A1C 7 or under. Before you eat, so when you wake up in the morning, we call that your fasting sugar. I tell my patients you should be between 80 and 130. No less. I don't want you to really be less, because too tight is not good, and not higher. Now, the fasting number is really 126, but it's hard to remember that. So we just tell people 130. So anything 130 and under is considered a good number to be at. If you wake up in the morning and your sugar is higher than that, that is too high. And you need to write that down on your log so your doctor's able to see you are spiking in the mornings and your fasting is too high, what needs to be adjusted. Now, don't go into the doctor and tell them, my sugar is 200 when I wake up in the morning, but leave out that you snack overnight. Because it's a fasting glucose. If you are up 12, 1, 2, you went to the restroom, let me just go grab a little, sorry, I'm looking at my auntie. Now, if you are going to grab a little snack and you may be snacking overnight, that's not a fasting. So you don't want to leave that information out because your doctor may then adjust your medicines, now control you too tightly, and then your sugar drops if you don't get up overnight and get your little snack. So it's a fasting glucose, meaning you're not waking up overnight to eat, 80 to 130. After you eat, 1 to 2 hours after eating, your sugar should not be more than 180. So you take in your breakfast, you wait a couple hours, you check your sugar, it should be under 180. The reason we give you a little bit of a higher reading is because we know throughout the day you're going to eat, and everyone's sugar should go up throughout the day because you're partaking in food. So it's not as lower or tightly controlled as your morning because that's your fasting. This is your throughout the day, I'm eating and I'm going about my day, living my life. So 180 or less is considered good for that. Anything over that, you want to tell your doctor. And then this is kind of what Ms. Perla about the CGM. So if you have one of those and you kind of know what I'm referencing, when you look at your overall report and your overall data, it will have very low, low, normal, high, very high. 70% of your time should be spent in the normal range. And your CGM will tell you, you have, for the past 14 days, you have been in your normal range 85% of the time. We say, that's great. If your CGM tells you you have only been in your normal 5% of the time, that's terrible. So the CGM does help correlate to know what your A1C will probably be based on where you have spent the majority of your time. Okay, so if you have a CGM, this is a little different because you're not pricking your finger. You just want to make sure 70% of the time you're in the normal range. All right. Questions, anybody? Okay. Why does it matter about your A1C? One, because that's how we monitor how well your diabetes is doing. Keeping it controlled helps us prevent the complications, and that'll be the last thing we touch on is the complications of diabetes. When your A1C is tightly controlled, we're protecting your heart, we're protecting your blood vessels. It helps you feel better, so you have more energy, you're able to go about your day and do what you need to do. It slows down how fast you're progressing in terms of your diabetes, how fast you are developing complications. And it helps us to guide your treatment. So when I change someone's treatment regimen, I'm changing it based on their A1C. So the A1C is important. That's the number we're always referring to when we say, how's your diabetes doing? So if you go to a new doctor and they say, how good is your diabetes? You want to tell them my last A1C was. That way we'll know how it's doing. Yes, sir. Correct. It doesn't, it's no difference. Absolutely. You're gonna think it's all food. Sure. Now, if your doctor is doing a good job, they can ask you, what's been going on, right? So because when you practice medicine, it should not just be, I'm focused on this one disease process. It's everything. It's mind, body, soul. It's all connected. So a good healthcare provider should say, this is your A1C, and they should ask you, what's been happening? That's your opportunity to say, I've been eating bad. I had a stressful 3 months. I got off my good exercise regimen. You lay that all out there because it does factor in, right? And so I'd like to know what things contributed to your A1C increasing. Tell me everything you've been doing, good and bad, that has caused this to change. And that should be your opportunity to say, I've been under a little bit more stress. Now, does it change our management? Not necessarily. We're still gonna tightly control that A1C if we need to, because it doesn't matter if your sugar went up because of stress or food, it still went up. And there's only one way to manage it. Now, we should add to that, find ways to help your stress. And if you need help with that, we can talk about it, get you connected to therapy, whatever that looks like. So yes, we should give you treatment options for the stress specifically, but we still manage it the same way because the same consequences could happen in the body simply because it's just all your sugar. Very good question. Okay. Complications. What are the complications of diabetes? So long-term side effects. What happens in the body? Nerve damage. Perfect. Nerve damage. Kidney. Yep. Heart disease. Perfect. Body not healing properly. Yes, ma'am. All of those are great answers. There's 3 big ones that I always want you to think about, and these should always be addressed at your doctor's visit. So 1, your kidney health. The organs in your body will see the side effect of diabetes, and those organs are your kidneys. So some of the first signs that your kidneys are being affected, we can detect that. And the kidneys are an organ that diabetes affects over time. If you see someone on dialysis, the top 2 reasons people go on dialysis is because of uncontrolled diabetes and uncontrolled blood pressure. So if you don't want to have to sit on a dialysis machine 3-4 hours, 3 days a week, you can control your diabetes and that will help prevent that. So kidneys are a side effect of uncontrolled diabetes. Nerves, like Sister Montgomery said, so over time you can have nerve damage. That's when people get neuropathy. So if you ever see someone say, I lost my leg due to diabetes, well, what happened was they lost feeling. They got a sore or an ulcer. They didn't realize it was there. It went untreated. The foot got infected. Unable to save it, they had to cut it off, right? So amputations and limb loss is also a side effect of uncontrolled or a long-term complication of diabetes. Number 3, eye damage. So reason people sometimes lose their vision is because of diabetes. So kidneys, eyes, nerves, nephropathy, retinopathy, neuropathy, the apathies. Every doctor's appointment, you should be asked these questions. I always ask my patients, when was your last eye exam? Every year you should go to the eye doctor, probably more frequently if you already have some eye problem. When you go to your eye doctor, you need to always let them know, hey doc, I have diabetes, because they know to look at the vessels behind the eyes. They monitor the eyes differently. I ask my patients, do you feel anything in your feet? How do your feet feel? Are they numb? We do a test called your monofilament test. Can you feel me touching you? Can I check the bottom of your feet? Do you check the bottom of your feet? Do you see any open wounds, open sores? Do you have feeling? And you should always check your feet if you have diabetes, because you never know when you could have stepped on something and got a wound. And then lastly, I need to check your urine to make sure your kidneys are not showing signs of damage. So eyes, kidneys, nerves, long-term complications of diabetes. There are also some other ones. So heart disease is a great one that Sister Montgomery mentioned. Over time, your blood vessels are affected. You develop heart attack and strokes. Those are the big ones. Eyes, kidneys, feet. Okay, so keep those in mind. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Progress to now affect your kidneys. That's right. So in primary care world, we can take care of that, up until a certain point, and we do our best. Our job, honestly, if you're a primary care physician, should be to prevent you from getting to that place. That's why I'm checking your urine every time you come in. That's why I'm giving you medications that hopefully protect your kidneys. That's why I'm working so hard to control your diabetes so that I don't have to send you to a nephrologist, aka a kidney doctor. If you're being referred to a kidney doctor, you probably have progressed. And the kidneys are forgiving to a certain extent. Like Sister Passmore asked if the pancreas is forgiving. Some organs are forgiving. The kidneys are one of them. But you can't take that for granted. You can't just keep, having an uncontrolled diabetes, because eventually they will give out as well. So if you made it to that point, that must mean the kidneys are now affected. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. You tell them that you're pre-diabetic. You say, no, sir, I'm not diabetic, but I am pre-diabetic. So if you still could check my eyes for any signs of damage, that would be good. Because you should not be in the realm of developing those issues if you stay pre-diabetic, so that's good. But you always want them to know, because pre-diabetes is still on the spectrum of a diabetic disorder. So you respond, not diabetic, but pre-diabetic. And they still will make sure they check certain vessels and certain structures in your eye. Yes, ma'am. So stage 3 or stage 3 and up, is where we get concerned about being concerned. So your GFR is what Sister Montgomery is referring to, is your filtration rate. So it's one of the ways that we monitor your kidney function. For me, it's stage 3 and up. So 3, 4, 5, that's when it's not good. Stage 1 and 2, manageable. And that usually is like 40s, 50s, if you're using the 90 scale. I'm getting a little technical, but okay, good question. Diabetic foot care. So again, this is the biggest thing I tell people: when you're diabetic, look at your feet. Lift them up. If you cannot lift up your legs anymore, sit them in front of a mirror so that you are able to see if you have any open wounds, open sores. Can you feel your feet? How do your toes look? Is the toenail hanging off? Did you hit your toenail and it's getting infected? You do not want any foot infections, because that's what leads to amputations. So always checking your feet. Again, 3 things you always get monitored for when you go to your doctor. We should do a monofilament. That's a little device. It's a nylon structure that I use to touch the bottom of your feet at different points to make sure that you feel light pressure. You should always give them a urine sample. Hey, did you check my urine to make sure I'm not losing protein? And they should always be asking you, did you go to the eye doctor this year? Sometimes more regularly if you already have eye problems. Yes, ma'am. That's right. So very good point, Ms. Tigler. So we can check your kidney function through your blood, and that was kind of Mrs. Montgomery's question. That's your filtration rate. We can check your kidneys through your urine, because that's how we monitor if you're losing protein in your urine. So it can be checked 2 ways, blood and urine. If you're a diabetic, you should also be getting the urine test as well. So they complement each other. You need both. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Gangrene. Mm-hmm. So gangrene is just an infection that has gone untreated. So it has become just a very bad infection. And it starts very simple, a simple toe cut or a foot cut that becomes infected, goes untreated. You don't feel it. It's developing infection. It's not getting treated. Then boom, now it has gotten deeper. So it's no longer superficial. It's deep to your muscle. It's deep to your bone. And there's no way for us to treat it with medicines. The only way to treat it is we got to amputate it. Mm-hmm. So it's just a very complicated infection. Mm-hmm. From spreading, absolutely, that's right. And so if you catch it in time, we hope that we could just debride it. So a lot of times I tell my patients, as soon as you see a foot sore, you come into the doctor. If you can't get to me, go to urgent care, go to the ER, go somewhere so that you can at least get antibiotics, get someone to clean it. Because oftentimes if you catch it early, we can debride the dead tissue, meaning we can scrape out that dead tissue, give you good wound care, and save it. But if you wait too late, there's no saving it. And we cut it off to stop the spread. That's correct. Absolutely, yes, ma'am. So any signs of any changes, color, temperature, cuts, wounds, drainage, anything, feeling, sensation, all of that. Yes, ma'am. Okay, we're close to the end. Treatment, last part. Remember, I wasn't going to go too detailed on treatment because it's very individualized, and so this is different from person to person. How we treat diabetes is very patient specific, okay? But the main goal is we need to lower your sugar because you don't want to be walking around with high sugar in your blood. We want to reduce your risk of developing a heart attack, stroke. We want to prevent you from getting eye problems, kidney problems, nerve problems, and we want to improve your quality of life, okay? So that's the reason why we treat it. At the core of treatment, no doctor should talk to you about treatment without first saying, please change your diet and please change your physical activity. If someone just quickly says, here go medicine, question it. Because you can make a big impact on your diabetes with just lifestyle changes. I always share with my patients in residency, I had a lady, she came in to see me, incidentally was found to have an A1C of about 14 and refused all medicines. And I was thinking, my attendants are going to look at me like I'm crazy. They're going to say, what are you doing? You didn't get this lady any medicines. She is not going to make it. She's going to have complications. I was scared. I begged, I pleaded, I tried all the things to get her to take a medicine. And she said, if you can just tell me what I need to do in terms of my diet and my exercise, if you can connect me with like a nutritionist, if you can connect me to a diabetic educator, she said, I promise you I will get it down. And I did not believe her. I was like, you probably can make it better, but you're not going to get that A1C down without medicine. Like I just didn't believe that. She came back to see me in about 3.5 months. Her A1C was 6.7. And I was shocked. So shocked that I said, we got to repeat this test, ma'am, because I didn't believe it. She was able to get her A1C down with diet and exercise by itself, but she said it was hard. She said it was very hard. She said, I went home, I took out everything. I was basically empty, refrigerator, pantry. I didn't have any groceries left, basically. And she started over. And she said, for the 3 months that I have not been here, I have been eating healthy every single day, not one cheat meal, and I have been exercising every single day. So I tell all my patients that story because there's nothing better that you can do for yourself than changing your diet and your exercise and your physical activity. We can pile medicines on top of each other. I can always give you a medicine. They're plentiful. But I doubt you want that. I doubt you want to be on 5, 6, 7 diabetic medications. I doubt you want to be on insulin. If that's true, you can make a big impact with just diet and lifestyle. So number one should always be a discussion of diet and lifestyle changes. And if you don't get offered that, you ask for that. Do you have an educator in your facility? Do you have a nutritionist? Or what resources can you direct me to online? Everything that's here I found on the American Diabetic Association website. They give you a diet plan and everything. So this information is free. So core should always be diet. When you have to treat with medicines, there's a lot of different types. There's oral medicines, there's injectable medicines, there's insulin. As a diabetic, we try to prevent you from getting on insulin, but sometimes you can become dependent on insulin even as a type 2 diabetic. So oftentimes people say, you take insulin? Are you type 1? No, you can actually be type 2 and become insulin dependent, but that's when your diabetes has gone a little too far. So now we have to give you insulin to help your pancreas because it doesn't work anymore. How we choose a medicine is very individualized. There's so many different medications to choose from. So it depends on, you can go to the next slide, Byron. If you have a weight loss goal, it depends on if you have kidney problems. It depends on if you have heart problems, because if you do, then we pick medicines that can help hopefully with like 2 things in one. So if you get my gist, there's so many different ways to treat it. It's very patient specific on what we choose. And hopefully your doctor is picking something that can help. This is what's called the diabetic plate method, which we all should follow. But if I tell my patients, when you sit down to eat your meal, this is a 9-inch plate, because sometimes plates come a little bigger. So this is a 9-inch plate that you are splitting in half. Half of your plate should be filled with non-starchy vegetables, not just any vegetable, non-starchy vegetables, okay? Kale, spinach, broccoli, cucumbers, all the healthy stuff. The other half of your plate, you split into 2, so you have a fourth and a fourth. You want a lean meat, chicken, turkey, seafood, over beef and pork, because like Ms. Tigler just mentioned, the cholesterol will go up with pork and beef, and then you want a healthy carb. You still need a carb, right? So you still need glucose. It's just a small amount. It's the right type of carb, and honestly, it's the small amount. Most of us, the plate looks the opposite. I know when I make my spaghetti, I got more pasta and a little bit of salad on the side, but that's not how it should be. So if you could just switch that, and instead of half of your plate being filled with the unhealthy carb, you fill it with the vegetables and the fourth with the healthy carb. What's that face for, Miss Montgomery? No carbs for you? Okay, that's fine too. It's just, and that's good. That means you have strong willpower. Most people cannot do that. I know most people can't do that. So we tell them you can have a carb. It just has to be a very small amount and the right type. So instead of white rice, brown rice, quinoa, lentils, instead of a white potato, sweet potato. Sweet potato actually has benefits. Instead of white bread, whole grain. So you switch it out for the healthier, and it's still a small amount. Or you could do no bread. That's fine too. Yeah. Me too, Reverend Montgomery. Yes. It would probably save you some trouble. So remember, now if you're getting your glucose through a starchy vegetable, then okay. But remember, carbs break down into sugar, and sugar is fuel for the body. So remember, I said we need fuel. We just need the right amount, not too much. Now, if you are just like if your diabetes is just terrible and your doctor tells you, hey, you got to cut it all out to get your numbers better, okay. But once your numbers are good, to keep them good, you can still incorporate that stuff. And this is also kind of more for prevention. So this is how we should be eating, even if you don't have problems. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Is cornbread good? I know, but is it good? All right, then. That usually answers the question. I usually tell people, if it's good, it's probably not good for you. Just being honest. All right, Byron, next slide. So again, individualized. I did list common medications here just so, because I know people probably want to know, is this medicine right for me? What does this medicine do? Listen, if your doctor gives you a medicine, please ask them, how does this work? How is it actually treating my diabetes? What side effects should I look for? Okay. Sometimes we say, hey, take this medicine, it's going to help your diabetes, see you in 3 months. No, if you want to know how this medicine works in your body, what it does, ask them, okay? Oral medicines, the common ones, people probably heard of metformin, that's the most common. It's now being phased out. For me, it's no longer first line, so I don't prescribe it hardly anymore. If you come to me, you're already on it, we keep you on it. Because, hey, if it was working, don't change it. But if this is your first time being diagnosed with diabetes or prediabetes, I don't like it. It doesn't have benefits. It has a lot of side effects, but it's still very common. Some of the other ones are the glipizide families. The 2 new class that we hopefully have all heard of are like your Jardiance and your Farxiga, your Ozempic and your Mounjaros. These are great medicines because not only do they help your diabetes, but they help your kidneys, they help your heart. So I have seen people actually get prescribed these medicines without even having diabetes. So they have a lot of benefits. Yes, sir. Yes. The side effects? Sure. What about the side effects of diabetes? Okay. That's right. So when people, and not to discredit what you're saying, and when you do have questions about side effects, your doctor should answer those. I always go over the side effects, but I also remind you of the complications of diabetes, right? Yes, as medication studies and trials are being done, we have to tell you everything that a patient experienced while taking that medicine is just required by law. So those side effects sound scary because they have to list These people were in the clinical trials, and these are all the things that everybody said they had. They just have to put it out there. Very rarely do you actually experience that enough in everyday practice for that to be a deterrent from using a medicine, right? And if you do develop side effects, you say, hey, I'm concerned, I have side effects, can we stop this, or can I ask you if this is normal? So you always bring that up. But more importantly, it's what about the side effects of diabetes? Yep. Okay, and then lastly, I put on that one, which was kind of what Mrs. Tigler talked about. Most of the time, if you have diabetes, your doctor will also offer you a cholesterol medicine. So it is a recommendation because having diabetes combined with high cholesterol increases your risk for a heart attack or a stroke tenfold. So we just usually always put people on a cholesterol medicine as well. It's actually recommended by the ADA and by a lot of the governing bodies. So usually you have to be on a cholesterol medicine if you have diabetes. All right. Lastly, remember your diabetes is your treatment plan, so it's very specific to you. These are the big things you want to make sure you're always addressing with your physician. Having a good checkup, more than likely if you have diabetes, you're going to the doctor besides once a year. When is my next diabetic follow-up? Typically it's every 3 months. When was my last eye exam? Should be yearly, more often if you have eye problems already. Dental exam is also important because a lot of times if you're diabetic, you don't want to get a tooth infection that goes untreated, travels, and that could be bad. When was my last foot exam? When is my next A1C due? And then all the other things about my heart, my liver, and my kidneys. How's my blood pressure? How's my cholesterol? How's my kidney function? You want to make sure they're checking those as well. All right, I think last slide. Take home points. So number 1, screening is always important. Remember, that's the best way for prevention. Go to your doctor, get your annual exams, ask them to test you for diabetes if you don't already have it. Type 2 diabetes is very common. However, it is also very manageable, all right? So it does not have to be something that impacts your life in a negative way if you're able to take control over it with your healthcare provider. Your A1C matters because the best we control it, the better outcomes you'll have and the less likely you'll have complications. Remember, kidneys. What else? Complications, kidneys, eyes, nerves, that's right, good job. Healthy eating, regular physical activity will help control your diabetes as well as prevent. Take your medications as prescribed, that's important. You wanna regularly monitor your A1C, your feet, your urine, as well as your eyes. Your goal should be to prevent complications, improve your quality of life so you can live healthy for a long time. And remember, small, consistent steps will make a big difference over time. I think that's it. Questions? Yes, ma'am. That's okay. I love that question. That's a great question. Why would you come off? Because your A1C is controlled? What's controlling it? So yes and no. I give patients a trial. So I usually tell them, if we have gotten your A1C to a great point, but you have a few medications in place, let's maybe pull one back and see how you do. If you're only on one medicine, I say, okay, for maybe like 2 months, let's take it off. If you come back and now your A1C has gone up, then we say, uh-oh, you may need it. So unfortunately, that's a very good question, though. A lot of people say, do I have to be on this forever? And I say, you may need to be on it long term, but if you are able to do your due diligence with diet and exercise, it is possible to stop. But a lot of people know that that's hard, and they know they're not going to do right because we're human. We want a late night snack. We want the pecan and the ice cream, like Ms. Stigler said, right? So it's hard. And so sometimes you may need a medicine lifelong or long term to keep you healthy for as long as we can. But is it possible? Yes, it's just hard. Sure, absolutely. That's a very common thing that can happen. Yes, ma'am. That's right. That's why I didn't want to go too far into treatment, because some medicines are not appropriate for everyone. And if you do have those times when your glucose is dropping too low, you want to notify your healthcare provider so they can address that. You had a question, Auntie? Yes, ma'am. I know, we talked about this. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's a good point. Remember we talked about sometimes treating it is, there's a lot of factors that go into why we may not treat someone so tightly, right? And so if you have been hovering around 7, maybe your doctor has said, I'm okay with her hovering around 7. She likely won't have any complications. She's keeping it at 7 on her own. Okay. Maybe if I were to treat her with this medicine, it would interact with this medicine, and that one's more important. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. If it's a steady trend where you're increasing, then I usually tell my patients we need to intervene. But maybe your provider is a little bit more lenient and operating with, I don't want to tightly control her because she's been doing okay, and she's 77 years old. Sorry to say your age. Yes. Mm-hmm. You just asked me this earlier, Donna Lynn. I said maybe at some point you were a little higher, or maybe your doctor is someone who treats you when you're in the pre-diabetic range. I think you have been higher. I've seen your labs. And that's what happens. So they may keep you on it even though you've controlled it, because they want to keep you controlled. There's no right or wrong. So let me say this. Medicine is an art. We have guidelines. We go to school. We learn things. We're supposed to follow certain guidelines. And to a certain extent, that's important. But medicine is an art. I never treat one person the same as the next. There's a lot of factors that go into treating people, right? And so doctors operate differently. As long as they're not doing any harm and you think they're, not doing your due diligence, okay? But medicine is an art. So there's a lot of ways to practice it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. So that's a very good point. When you have made it to needing insulin, that means your pancreas does not work anymore. So you are now an insulin-dependent diabetic, and that means you probably will need insulin in order to keep your sugars controlled. So less likely do we take away insulin if you've already made it there. Yeah. They can pull it back, so you may not need as many units. You probably can bring that down. But if you have made it to now needing insulin, that means you've burned out your pancreas, and that means you need some. You may not need a lot, but you may need some. And rarely do we take that away. These are very good questions, everyone. All right, I had gift bags I wanted to give out, but I only have 5 because I want to see who's been paying attention. And so if you answer these questions correctly, you can get a gift bag. So we'll do it by whoever raises their hand first and who gets the question correct. Everybody ready? Okay. What organ in the body produces insulin? Yes, ma'am. Her hand went up first. Yes. Good job. She said pancreas. Good job. You gonna help me? Thank you, Mama. Okay. Give me the range of A1C for a pre-diabetic person. I don't want to give it to you. Yes, ma'am, Miss Carolyn. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. All right, let me repeat the question because we guessing. Range of A1C for a pre-diabetic person. Sister Passmore still has her hand up. No, ma'am. We got somebody who's not here for the session, but they want to comment. Yes, ma'am, Miss Talisa. No, ma'am. I said the range. Yes, ma'am. Yes, for pre-diabetic. Come on, Spillman sister. We got to come in and save the day. Good job. She said 5.7 to 6.4. I said the range for pre-diabetic, okay? Y'all were in the range. You were throwing out all the numbers, but what is the range? Okay, good job. Now, not to get in your personal business, you may not be a diabetic. That stuff in there is more for people that got diabetes. So, okay, there we go. Okay, next question. Um, Give me the three top. No, let me rephrase. What are the three P's for diabetic signs and symptoms? Yes, Miss Carolyn. No, ma'am. I said the three P. You didn't let me finish my question. The three P's for common signs and symptoms of diabetes. Ooh, nobody listened. I did. Yes, Miss Joanne. Good job, Miss Joanne. Yes, ma'am. I know. I was gonna say we'll let you slide. I know you're a nurse, but we'll let you slide. But that's good. Polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. Three P's. Yes, ma'am. How many more we got? Two. Okay. I know everybody gonna get that one right because you already said the answer to that one. Let's do. What three things should your doctor monitor at least once a year for being a diabetic person? I saw Mrs. Green. Good job. Yes. You're not getting a gift. You already got a gift. She said your eyes, your kidneys, and your nerves. That's correct. Okay, last question. What are the three big complications of diabetes? Now, Miss Carolyn, you've been okay. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Finally. I know. Okay. Thank you guys for listening, being attentive, asking good questions. Hopefully, you learned something and can leave here feeling a little bit more empowered about taking control of your diabetic health. Yes, ma'am. Oh, we had another question? Yes, sir. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure. Oh, thank you. We're done, right?
Wow, a lot of information. I didn't eat anything since 9 o'clock last night, and something was happening to me a few minutes ago. My sugar was dry. So I went back and got some of Pearl's cocoa soup. Drank a cup of her cocoa soup, and I got okay. That's probably not good, but that's what I did. Okay, if you did not sign in and you got in this, please sign in. We need this information. But Montgomery been here, but he didn't sign in. So you will do it now. Okay. All right. All right. Any more questions? Any comments? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for attending. Let's get the word out there. We at H Street Baptist Church, we're concerned about not only your spiritual health, your physical health, your whole well-being. And that's what we are about in our health ministry here at the H Street Baptist Church. Let's please get involved. Amen? Okay.
Yes, sir. You close us out. Prayer. Close out.
We're going to close out. They have some snacks back there. Don't forget the soup. The reason I call it soup, Pearl kept us stirred. I said, what is she doing? She did it for 15 minutes. She just stirred. It was cocoa, but she was stirred. I thought it was some vegetable soup the way she was stirred. Thank you again so much. And we really appreciate what we're doing. And we're going to try to do this every third Saturday. Every third Saturday of the month, we're going to try to have somebody here to talk about your total health, including you, Emily. You're supposed to give me that eye on. I learned that when I look at people God, just thank you because the word is you're a good God. And we testify you've been good to us. And we thank you for it. Let us receive this information and use it like you designed for us to use. Thank you for the gift of medicine. Thank you for the gift of self-will. Bless us in all that we do, and we will give you the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
If you did not sign the sheet, please do that. But some of you came in on the last end of it. Don't talk to me.
Thank you, Miss Jasmine. And if I don't see you tomorrow, I'll see you in 2 weeks. 1 week.
Late, we just haven't
Okay.
handed out.